me start.
Yep. So we're back.
Messing around.
That's it. We're back. I was gone for a while, and suddenly, poof! Here's a guy,
Wow, here I am.
and it is Mark Stolaroff, who's an old buddy of mine, and I think is an amazing guy and very smart and experienced in the independent film world, and has produced some films and runs a thing called No Budget Film School, where you make monies for no money,
No one.
zero,
No
not
one makes
even
money.
one dime.
Yeah, no.
Sort of. Although your movies are not no-budget films.
It depends on the definition of no-budget films.
Okay.
I have my own definition of no-budget filmmaking, which I use in my class, which is the idea that you, it's the amount of money you have available to you right now to make a movie with without going out and raising money, except for maybe Kickstarter or crowdfunding.
Okay.
So in that context, every movie I've made has been a no-budget film because I have not put a business plan together and raised money in any kind of traditional way to make the films that I've made. I put my own money in. I've gotten it from, it's usually, my producing partners and I, and maybe like one other, like family member or something, we haven't raised money. And Kickstarter, we've done Kickstarter twice to get finishing funds.
Cool. So you have raised a little bit of money.
In that way, but it's
Beyond
not about
the money
it's not about perform pre-sales and
Yeah.
attaching actors and getting in agents, packaging projects and putting together 20-page business plans and all that stuff. I'm doing that right now, so I'm kind of familiar with that process, but it's none of that. It's more about making a film as opposed to running around chasing money and raising money.
Yeah.
So you know about that stuff.
Yeah,
too, obviously.
I do, but let's tell them.
Sure.
What are a few key? Since you have so much great information, I'm going to ask Warren. Hey, Warren, can you make sure that the chat is up? And if people want to ask Mark questions, just shout them out, and we'll answer them. So, what are some of the key things that you that go into the no budget concept? Like, if there's 4 or 5, bottom line.
I have
concepts.
these things called write it down rules. When you take my class, they're like kind of bullet pointy rules that are very simple and easy to write down. But they're more complex to talk about. So the first one is you have to refuse to spend money.
Okay.
Sounds very easy, and it's almost it's the most difficult thing in the world to do if you're making a movie, is to refuse to spend money. And then as I kind of develop this whole kind of thesis through the first half of the class, there's a deeper meaning to refuse to spend money that I can't even begin to suggest it now because you wouldn't understand it. It's such a high concept idea. And then the second kind of big bullet point concept is embrace your limitations, which is also more complicated than it sounds, but it's partly the idea of embracing what you're doing, this whole kind of way of making a film where you're not going to get paid, where you're having to beg, borrow, and steal, where you're having to wear a lot of hats, where you're not going to get any respect, you're probably not going to make any money on the movie, that you're making, all these kinds of things. And instead of being, bummed about that and going, God, I wish I could make money with $1 million or whatever, you're kind of excited about it. You're like, that's exactly what I'm in for. I'm really, and understanding kind of the benefits of working that way is actually part of embracing, that in that way. But then the kind of more interesting way to embrace your limitations is also what I call creatively embracing your limitations, where you find the advantages in those limitations, which is a classic hallmark of no-budget filmmaking. I show, an example from Clerks, for instance, where, he really created, and Following, which is I do a big case study of Following, which is Chris Nolan's first film, which I worked on for several years, where filmmakers are not only kind of going, oh, I guess, all right, I'm gonna work this way, but they're finding advantages in working that way, and they're taking something that's inherent from that situation of having no resources and making that a critical part of the story, even, so that it's really working for you as opposed to working against you. And again, I go through that. I'd spend probably 30 minutes just talking about that one idea. And then the kind of key, probably the biggest, most important thing is it's really the only way you're going to make a movie for no money, is to write for what you have, essentially, to work within the framework of available resources. And I kind of go through that. And a lot of people take my class, they've got like an idea they already want to make, and they're just expecting me to teach them how to make that $1 million movie for $100,000 or for $20,000 or something like that, which I do go through a whole lot of different, ideas and how to kind of make things for less money. But that's not how the filmmakers that you and I and people that come to my class who really, have followed, who have like, oh, I love Clerks, or I loved El Mariachi, or I loved, Alex Karpovsky's Red Flag, which is a guest speaker I had recently. You know, those people did not come up with $1 million idea and then shrink it down to 10,000. It's almost impossible to do that. They wrote for what they had, or the little that they had, and they basically invented a project around their situation, which is something I really teach you how to do. And I believe that's like kind of a great path to go on, because as you know, from going to Sundance a million times like I have, that and I know this from also working at Next Wave Films, where I had to look at thousands of movies to decide which ones we're going to invest in, which is a similar process that Sundance is going through, or South by Southwest, or whatever. That uniqueness is the most important thing you're looking for. Sundance is looking for something they haven't seen before, and when you generally, you have this idea and you come in and you want to make this movies, often those movies are derivative. They're based on other movies you've seen or whatever. But when you go down the path of your own resources and you put together a resource list of things that are very specific to you, the things that you have, like let's just say this building. I don't know where you got this building. It's an interesting building. You could make a really interesting movie here. If this was something that you had available to you, you may not have thought about setting a movie in this building, but you could start to do that, and as you start to look around and walk around the pathways, it would be kind of some really interesting story ideas could come up just from this location that you got for free, and a completely different story than maybe you ever wanted to tell. So it's like really letting your limitations, letting your resources kind of inspire the story, textually influence what you're doing, lead you down a unique path that allows you to make something completely unique, just by virtue of that's the only thing you can make. So there's a number of reasons to kind of do this other than just saving money.
Yeah, and the thing is, like you said, the key is to take what seems like a limitation and turn it into a creative challenge.
Exactly.
Oftentimes you'll come up with something so original and so cool, it's far better than having the money to throw at.
Which you see, if you listen to like DVD commentaries, you hear those stories all the time. There was a great one, and I used to use it in my class for Rocky. The whole roller skating scene, which is like one of the kind of key scenes of the movie. It's one of the most, memorable scenes of that film. Is like that was a complete mistake. They wasn't supposed to be like that at all. They were supposed to have extras, and it was supposed to be this whole different scene, and then they couldn't get any of the extras, and it was just the two of them, and they had to completely rewrite that scene. And it's this like wonderful, wonderful scene in that film. It's another, those examples happen all the time.